We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hunter Biden pleads not guilty to gun crimes, and Donald Trump pleads not guilty in the court of public opinion for similar accusations. What's this all about? Well, we're lucky to be joined by Liberty Nation's man about town, legal affairs editor, and host of the most excellent Uprising podcast, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire, to explain the gun issues on both sides of the political dynasty. Scott, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Mark. Thank you.
Tell me, what's going on here? Now, we had Hunter Biden in court this last week where he, for 3 gun charges, I believe, and he pleaded not guilty to all 3 of those. What's the scope of his commitment to that plea?
If we may, Mark, I would actually handle the Trump matter first. I think it's more easily dispensed with and just requires a little less nuance. And it is that Donald Trump handled a particular firearm at a gun store in South Carolina and said, "Oh, I'd like to buy one of these." And somebody tweeted out that Donald Trump, bought this Glock, and because
just point out it was a specialized Glock with Donald Trump written on it.
Certainly, you can't expect former president of the United States to buy just any particular Glock.
The same kind of Glock that
for instance,
every schmo on the street might have.
Right.
Yeah,
no, it has to be extra. That he needs that second scoop. Don't forget.
Sure.
So then there was a kerfuffle about whether or not he did, and he is ineligible legally to purchase a firearm because he is charged with felonies, and he's undergoing, awaiting trial for those charges. He's ineligible to buy them. If he were to buy a firearm, he'd have to answer on a form, and this is why I wanted to talk about it before Mr. Hunter Biden, is he would have to say on a form that he wasn't currently charged with a serious crime, okay? And that would be, then he would have, because if he said, yes, I was, they would deny him the sale. And if he lied and said, no, I wasn't, then he would be committing a crime by lying on the form to get the firearm. And Mr. Trump or one of his spokespersons quickly announced that he did not, in fact, take possession of nor try to purchase that firearm. He merely expressed the interest that he would like to purchase the firearm.
Okay, right. So, in fact, just one question on that before we do move on to the meat of the story, which is the Hunter Biden court case here. So even though Donald Trump has not been found guilty of the felonies for which he's being charged, his constitutional rights are in abeyance until that plays out?
Well, it's a funny thing, Mark, and we'll revisit this, I think, with the discussion of Mr. Hunter Biden's charges, that our Second Amendment rights are oftentimes in abeyance or otherwise restricted until the government decides that we may exercise them in a manner that frustrates gun rights proponents regularly.
Okay, but is that the only constitutional right that's stripped from somebody facing a felony charge without being found guilty? So still presumably, as long as we're following the rules here, still innocent. But that's the only constitutional right that is held in abeyance?
I can't think of any restriction on you could say that bail conditions often restrict the rights of travel, for instance, and also the consumption of intoxicating beverages, for instance, and maybe in jurisdictions where marijuana is legal, the consumption of that as well. I'm not sure. But in terms of the expression of a right, it's not like that you can't start a printing press or a website if you're under indictment, right? Just as a matter of course. But it does, the firearms laws as currently constituted do provide for the restriction of that right for anyone who is charged.
Okay, so let's move straight into Hunter Biden then. So there are 3 charges that he pleaded not guilty to in court this week. And what were those charges, please?
Well, falsifying a federal firearms form and illegal possession of a firearms while using a narcotic are the big ones. The form that we discussed with Donald Trump requires that you answer that you are not an active user of or addicted to narcotics, and Hunter Biden answered that he was not in order to be able to get possession of the firearm.
And then, of course, we know from his own writings that he was addicted and a user of substances during that time from his own autobiography, right?
Well, that's where the charges originated from, is the publishing of his autobiography and basically him telling on himself that he was. So that is where the charges come from. And let me just hasten to add that there are many firearms rights advocates, myself included, who think that it is not okay to condition the expression of the Second Amendment right on the certification that one is, not doing things that the government doesn't want. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that these kinds of, pre-clearance forms are okay for the expression of rights. We don't have it for other rights, and it seems to me if it's inappropriate for that pre-clearance for other rights, then why is it okay in the instance of the Second Amendment or gun rights?
Okay, so there's certainly a bit of crossover here. Trump, if he had bought the gun in question, would be facing almost exactly the same charges as Hunter Biden, right?
Somehow I think the trial would have already occurred if
it would have already occurred, and the jumpsuits would have been worn, right?
First the verdict, then the trial. In that case,
of course. Well, if you do read the social media, the verdict has already been given on Donald Trump. But Hunter Biden, what are his chances, and what does he face? What music is the first son facing?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that's interesting is the Supreme Court's decision in the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin case, which is the latest landmark Second Amendment gun rights case that is still kind of reverberating through the courts. And we're still learning what behavior, where the line is for gun rights and restrictions on that right. And so I think that has a strong chance of influencing how the charges against Hunter Biden play out if they're delayed that long. We'll see what the story is. The Supreme Court has currently a case on their calendar that may kind of dial in what they mean under the Bruin case. This is the U.S. v. Rahimi case, which is going to be argued in November, about domestic violence and whether or not a domestic violence kind of order can trigger the removal of firearms rights. So we may see some articulation of where things can go, but historically, did the founders' vision of liberty include one where people who had chemical dependency might have been denied or debarred the use of firearms? That's, I think, where the court would go with this kind of challenge, assuming it gets that far. Hunter Biden did have a plea deal in place that got blown up by the judge. And
let's ever so quickly, can we just let's talk about that plea deal. This is the same judge that's overseeing this present case as the one who threw out the acceptance of the plea deal that had been negotiated between Hunter Biden's lawyers and the Department of Justice, right? And she said this plea deal is not acceptable. Is that correct? It's the same judge, and that's what she said.
Yes, this is Judge Mary Ellen Noriega, who I was a Trump appointee to the federal courts. And basically, the terms of the plea deal, as we understand them, they required the judge to make a determination as to whether or not Mr. Biden was substantially in compliance with the terms of his deal going forward. And we suspect the reason why is because they were insuring against a Republican generally, or more specifically, a Trump DOJ in the future, being unwilling to say that Hunter Biden did what he was supposed to. And so what the judge said was this impermissibly puts it's a separation of powers issue. That's the decision to prosecute is an executive function, not a judicial one. And it would put her in the position of being in the position to prosecute if she were the one to declare whether or not he was in compliance with the terms of the deal that they made. So
we'll see how, in light of the Bruin decision, this plays out for Hunter Biden, and if any new photos come out of Donald Trump, how it plays out for the former president. Scott DeCosenza, thanks ever so much.
Thanks, Mark.
And that's about all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio, right here on the Radio American Network. I'd like to thank our guests, longtime host of this here radio show, Mr. Tim Donner, and Legal Eagle, Mr. Scott DeCosenza, Esquire, for joining us. Also, my thanks to you out there across the nation for taking the time to tune in. My final thought this week comes from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, quote, "Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there's no path and leave a trail," end quote. Now, when we think about the novel and perhaps unprecedented nature of recent political events and of the potential for danger that we see there, perhaps it's wiser to consider the words of Mr. Emerson and understand that whether we see it or not, some people may just be clearing paths for the rest of us. Something to think about there. Thank you for listening. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are libertynation.com.